do more.
What specific
But I think
should he be doing?
I think he can do more, and you know, it's an area of the country that's very hot right now. I think New Rochelle, and a place I know very well. I grew up right near New Rochelle. I think it's an area that has to be tamped down even more because it's a hotbed. There's no question about it. So I think they can look at doing it. But we're getting along very well. We've had a very in fact, I noticed he made some statements just now that the relationship with the federal government has been good. The federal government has done everything they've wanted us to do. But we can, I think it's very important that all of the governors get along very well with us and that we get along with the governors. And I think that's happening.
The defense secretary and the assistant defense secretary decided to separate and be in a bubble to avoid the spread of the disease and to protect the chain of command. Is that something you and the vice president should be doing? And has there been any talk about having to have a 25th Amendment?
Well, we haven't thought of it, but you know, I will say this, that we're very careful. We're very careful with you know, being together. Even the people behind me they've been very strongly tested. I've been very strongly tested, and we have to be very careful. But everybody should be vigilant. We have to be vigilant.
Mr. President, two simple questions for you, Mr. President. Two simple questions for you, Mr. President.
Hold it before you.
Okay, I don't know if this is a question for you or for Dr. Burke, but Dr. Burke said that it is the millennials who are going to lead us through this, and that now is the time to look out for the older people in our home. Older might be a state of mind, not necessarily an age. So for those millennials of us who have parents who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, what is older? What should we tell them at this point?
Well, if I was Dr. Fauci, I would tell you there's a physiologic age and a numerical age. So older people with pre-existing conditions. And what do we mean by that? You know, significant heart disease, significant kidney disease, significant lung disease, any immunosuppression, any recent treatment for cancer, any of those pieces in any household. Now, why do I think the millennials are the key? Because they're the ones that are out and about. And they're the most likely to be in social gatherings. And they're the most likely to be the least symptomatic. And I think we've always heard about the greatest generation. We're protecting the greatest generation right now and the children of the greatest generation. And I think the millennials can help us tremendously by having plus they need to communicate with each other. Public health people like myself don't always come out with compelling and exciting messages that a 25 to 35-year-old may find interesting and something they will take to heart. But millennials can speak to one another about how important it is in this moment to protect all of the people. Now, you could be 40 and have a significant medical condition and be a substantial risk. You could be 30 and having come through Hodgkin's disease or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and be of a significant risk. So there are risk groups in every age group, but there's more millennials now than any other cohort, and they can help us at this moment.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. You already talked. Mr. President, the other day you said that you were not responsible for the testing shortfall. Very simple question. Does the buck stop with you? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your response to this crisis?
I'd rate it a 10. I think we've done a great job. And it started with the fact that we kept a very highly infected country, despite all of even the professionals saying, no, it's too early to do that. We were very, very early with respect to China. And we would have a whole different situation in this country if we didn't do that. I would rate it I would rate ourselves and the professionals. I think the professionals have done a fantastic job. As far as the testing, you heard the Admiral. I think the testing that we've done, we really took over an obsolete system, or put it maybe in a different way, a system that wasn't meant to do anything like this. We took it over, and we're doing something that's never been done in this country. And I think that we are doing very well. We took the system, we worked with the system we had, and we broke down the system purposely. We broke it down in order to do what we're doing now. And within a short period of time, and even now, we're testing tremendous numbers of people. And ultimately, you're saying it will be what? It will be up to how many people will we be able to test?
We certainly expect with the high throughput testing that that's no longer a barrier. The barrier is actually doing the test on a person. And I'm sure, as the president would inform you, in order to do the test, a healthcare provider needs to dress in full personal protective equipment. And there's a swab that's put in the back of the nose all the way to the back of the throat. It's called a nasopharyngeal swab, which is then put in media. The next person who has to get tested, that healthcare provider has to change all the personal protective equipment. When you put that in, it's highly likely a person coughs or sneezes, so you're at risk. So that's what we're trying to fix now by the mobile platforms, by all the things we're doing, is to enable sort of high throughput of this swabbing. And we're doing some technological things too that might be breakthroughs to make it much faster. But we certainly expect that from thousands of people per day, we will be at the tens of thousands of people per day this week, according to those who are.
Does the buck stop with you, Mr. President? Does the buck stop with you?
Yeah, normally, but I think when you hear this has never been done before in this country. If you look back, take a look at some of the things that took place in 09 or 11 or whatever it may have been. They never did. Nobody's ever done anything like what we're doing. Now, I will also say, Admiral, I think we can say that we're also getting this ready for the future, so that when we have a future problem, if and when, and hopefully we don't have anything like this, but if there is, we're going to be we're going to be starting off from a much higher plateau, because we were at a very, very low base. We had a system that was not meant for this. It was a smaller system. It was meant for a much different purpose. And for that purpose, it was fine, but not for this purpose. So we broke down the system, and now we have something that's going to be, and is very special, and is ready for future problems. I think we can say that very strongly. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes.
How close are you to shutting down America's northern border with Canada? And could you also speak to the fact about the elections that are supposed to be taking place tomorrow? Is it your advice that those states postpone those elections?
Well, I'd leave that up to the states. It's a big thing, postponing an election. I think, to me, that really goes to the heart of what we're all about. I think postponing an election is a very tough thing. I know they're doing, because they've been in touch with us, they're doing it very carefully. They're spreading people out at great distances, as you can see. And I think they'll do it very safely. I hope they do it very safely. But I think postponing elections is it's not a very good thing. They have lots of room in a lot of the electoral places, and I think that they will do it very well. But I think postponing is unnecessary.
On the northern border, sir, how close are you to shutting?
We think about it. If we don't have to do it, that'll be good. We have very strong emergency powers when it comes to something like this, both on the southern and the northern borders, and we are talking about different things, but we'll see. Right now, we have not decided to do that. Steve?
Could we get Dr. Fauci to talk about the vaccine trial today, and whether the timetable for a vaccine is it possible to accelerate, or is it still 12 to 18 months?
So, thank you for that question. The vaccine candidate that was given the first injections for the first person took place today. You might recall when we first started, I said it would be 2 to 3 months, and if we did that, that would be the fastest we've ever gone from obtaining the sequence to being able to do a phase 1 trial. This has been now 65 days, which I believe is the record. What it is, it's a trial of 45 normal individuals between the ages of 18 and 55. The trial is taking place in Seattle. There will be 2 injections, one at 0 day, first one, then 28 days. There will be 3 separate doses, 25 milligrams, 100 milligrams, 250 milligrams, and the individuals will be followed for 1 year, both for safety and whether it induces the kind of response that we predict would be protective. And that's exactly what I've been telling this group over and over again. So it's happened. The first injection was today.
Sir, the market just closed down 3,000, almost 13%. Your response to the market close, sir?
Thank you. Dr. Fauci, is there guidance for someone who may have felt sick but then feels better, so you had symptoms but you no longer do, your fever's gone away? How long would you stay home after that point? That's not clear from the guidance.
Well, if you are positive for the infection, if you have coronavirus, it is less how you feel than whether or not you're still shedding virus. So the general issue about letting people out of a facility, who, for example, a hospital or whatever, who have been infected, you need 2 negative cultures, the same way that was just described, 24 hours apart.
Yeah, no, the market will take care of itself. The market will be very strong as soon as we get rid of the virus. Yes.
Can you clarify about pregnant women? Is that an underlying? Because the UK said today the pregnancy was one of those underlying conditions. Do we say that too?
There's very little data in pregnant women. I think about a week ago, I said the reports that came in from China, from the Chinese CDC, of the 9 women who were documented to be pregnant and have coronavirus in their last trimester, delivered healthy children, and they themselves were healthy and recovered. That is our total sample size, and we will be getting more data from countries. While countries are in the midst of this crisis, like Italy, I try not to bother them frequently to get us their data. We try to get it just weekly from the countries that are in the midst of responding to the epidemic, so that their focus is on their individuals in their country.
Mr. President, any comment on what people like Devin Nunes, the governor of Oklahoma, have been saying, encouraging people to go out to restaurants, which goes directly against what this advice in your guidelines says?
No, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that from Devin or anybody else.
Should they stop saying that?
Well, I have to see what they said. But
They encourage people to go to restaurants if they felt okay with their families.
I would disagree with it, but right now we don't have an order one way or the other. We don't have an order, but I think it's probably better that you don't, especially in certain areas. Oklahoma doesn't have a tremendous problem. Oklahoma, you said the governor of Oklahoma.
Devin Nunes
And
is
Devin.
another.
Yeah, well, I hadn't heard that.
So should they be doing that or should they not be
Well,
doing
let's
that?
adverse to what the professionals are saying. That's,
And what you're saying in your guidelines, that people should be
No,
going
it's
to
adverse,
restaurants.
but I'll take a look at it. Absolutely.
I don't know who would be best to answer this question, maybe Secretary Hayes or Dr. Fauci. School districts across the country are closing down, yet for the most part, daycare centers remain open, and considering that children can sometimes be asymptomatic carriers and go home to older individuals, are there any recommendations about daycare centers?
I prefer if one of our medical professionals discuss that. That's a clinical recommendation.
That's a good question, John. In the original guidelines, as they were presented, it was schools, not daycare. I think it's very important. We should probably, if we have not discussed that, go back and discuss that in some detail about whether or not that's equivalent to school. It's a good question.
But the question about the sort of underlying public health strategy behind some of these guidelines, telling people to avoid restaurants and bars is a different thing than saying that bars and restaurants should shut down over the next 15 days. So why was it seen as being imprudent or not necessary to take that additional step, offer that additional guidance?
You want to answer that?
Well, I think we have to say the data that has been coming out, and I'm sure you're all up to date on how long the virus lives on hard surfaces. And that has been our concern over the last 2 weeks.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. I just want to read. There's an answer to this.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Tony. He was my mentor, so I'm going to have to let him speak.
The small print here, it's really small print. In states with evidence of community transmission, bars, restaurants, food courts, gyms, and other indoor and outdoor venues where groups of people congregate should be closed.
So, Mr. President, are you telling governors in those states then to close all their restaurants?
Well, we haven't said that yet.
Why not?
We're recommending,
But
but
if you
we're
think this will
recommending
work.
things. No, we haven't gone to that step yet. That could happen, but we haven't gone there yet. Please.
So on the election, you're saying it's bad things to postpone it, but if you've got the 10-person maximum, guideline, in a practical sense, can you have rallies? Can you primaries surely gather more than 10
Well,
people?
hopefully this will pass through, and hopefully that we'll have everybody will be going to restaurants and flying and being on cruise ships and all of these different things that we do, and it will very, very hopefully be in a fairly quick period of time. But we're taking a tough stance. We may make certain other decisions. We may enhance those decisions. We're going to find out. As per the question that you were asking, some of those decisions may be had. How about one more?
On the cyber attack on HHS,
Yeah.
is there any reason to believe that they were trying to hack into the system and gather information from the system? And also, is there any reason, so were they
they trying to hack to get information? And also, do you have any reason to think that it could have been Iran, Russia? Do you have any reason to believe it was a foreign actor?
So in the previous 24 hours, we saw a great deal of enhanced activity with relation to the HHS computer systems and website. Fortunately, we have extremely strong barriers. We had no penetration into our networks. We had no degradation of the functioning of our networks. We had no limitation of our capacity for people to telework. We've taken very strong defensive actions. The source of this enhanced activity remains under investigation, so I wouldn't want to speculate on the source of it, but there was no data breach or no degradation in terms of our ability to function and serve our important mission here. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, have you been
What are you
tested
looking
yet?
for in another stimulus package, sir? Could you speak to that?
One thing Mike just said, it's very important to get out that this is for the next, what we're talking about, much of what we're talking about is for the next 15 days. Mike, go ahead.
Mr. Vice President, have you been tested?
I've not been tested yet. I'm in regular consultation with the White House physician, and he said I've not been exposed to anyone for any period of time that had the coronavirus, and that my wife and I have no symptoms. But we're checking our temperature regularly every day, and we'll continue to follow guidance, which I think may be a good place to land at the end of the day. And that is, as we expand testing rapidly around the country through the new public-private partnership that the President facilitated, we want the test to be available for people who have symptoms, people who have symptoms and are in vulnerable populations, and our healthcare workers, to make sure that they can have the peace of mind that they're doing their jobs and they're properly protected. And so our best counsel, the counsel of the experts, is if you have a question, call your doctor, call your healthcare provider, ask whether or not you should be tested, and that's what my family's doing as well. Let me just emphasize one more point, if I can. The President asked the task force to continuously review the data and the information that we have, not only in this country, but from around the world, to give the best guidance to state leadership and local healthcare leadership and all of the American people about how to keep themselves, their family, and their community safe. This guidance for the next 15 days is what our experts say is the best opportunity we have to lower the infection rate over the entire course of the coronavirus. Just as the President did by suspending travel from China, just as he did with travel advisories and screening from Italy and South Korea, just as we've done with Europe and at midnight tonight with the UK and Ireland. We'll continue to take very decisive steps to lower the spread of the coronavirus. But we want every American to know, and we would ask all of you in the media what you can do over the next 15 days to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. And we're calling on every American to do your part, because together we'll get through this and we'll find our way forward.
Mr. President,
Just one more thing. Go ahead.
Mr. President, what do you think of this?
G7
Yeah,
video
go ahead, G7.
What was the upshot of that? Are you still going to be able to meet at Camp David?
Well, it looks like it.
and are you confident in their responses, as you are with
I'm very confident that they're in a position that some of them are in a rough position. If you look at a couple of them, and some are heading toward pretty rough territory. We had a very good conference. It was a teleconference. Everybody was on the phone, every leader. And almost 100% was devoted to the subject that we're talking about today. And they are working very hard. And they're very concerned, obviously, but they're working very hard. But I would say just about all of it was devoted to what we're talking about.
Hold that summit at Camp David?
I think so. I mean, so far it seems we didn't even discuss that. Still a ways off, but it was a very good discussion, and they have. There's a great camaraderie. There's a great togetherness. I think I can say that very, very strongly. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
To reiterate what the Senate President has stated, I think the House is really focused primarily on the COVID-19 situation, which we are presently, obviously, in the midst of. I think that is taking precedence over any other other issues that may be before the House. Obviously, we as the next party who has the budget in the ball in its court. There's going to be some questions as to how we are going to proceed relative to that. The need to speak to various interested parties. How is that going to work out? The need, for production and such. Right now, we're really pretty much just focused on this issue. That does not mean, obviously, that we're not meeting or talking to folks relative to the budget, but in terms of a time frame of whether we'll be on time or will be delayed somewhat or whatever it may be, I think that's yet to be decided. I think relative to the rules, I think it's going to be our request relative to the legislation that all people who wish to testify to do so in writing as opposed to personally, and we're hoping people will abide by that request. I'd also like to say that one of the things that the Senate President and I had discussed earlier was the fact that we are closing the necessity of outside non-personnel to come into the State House. In particular, we're talking about tours. And so unless it's requested by a particular state representative or senator that they need to see a particular person. But in certain terms of the further tours taking place in the State House or so-called outside interested parties taking a tour, that we are suspending those at this point.
So I just want to clarify, the State House will be closed to the public. The State House will be closed to the public. Legislators, constitutional officers, staff, employees, and invited guests will be able to continue to come to the State House, but we saw it very difficult. We would be disinfecting the State House in the evening only to have lots of people and tours come to the State House during the day, reinfecting a lot of it. And in order to keep the health and wellness of our employees, our staff, and all of the people that are here utmost, we feel that is the best thing. So I would imagine effective close of business. We didn't talk about the effective date, but it will be closed to the public.
I haven't heard that. I do know that the courts, based on the decision that we made over the course of the weekend and announced last night, that they were going to spend the following 2 days coming up with a game plan for how they were going to manage court business on a go-forward basis.
Governor, the Vice President announced today that they were going to send resources to 12 states to help with mobile testing sites. Does that include Massachusetts? And then what specifically are you guys doing to help launching mobile testing sites?
We're talking primarily to a number of private sector entities that have been designated by the White House to be sort of the leads on developing the mobile infrastructure.
Are you having problems with the 211 number of people that are calling the state?
That's the first I've heard of that. I'll obviously ask about it. We talk to the folks who are managing 211 usually at the end of each day, and I do know that they've fielded and processed and provided guidance at this point on thousands of calls. So, but I'll check into that. I mean, that is one thing that we can move up and down depending upon what people are looking for with respect to capacity. So we should be able to manage that. We've had a long conversation with our colleagues in the daycare community, and obviously issued new guidance based on those conversations to ensure that those organizations remain safe during this time. I think the biggest challenge for us is that many of the people who work in the healthcare world and are first responders and are the people who need to be at work for public safety and health purposes rely on many of those providers to be able to do so. But that's going to be an ongoing conversation that will obviously evolve as time goes by.
Supermarkets and shopping malls, places where naturally you may have more than 25 people coming.
Well, we said with respect to supermarkets yesterday that the 25 people does not apply to them, but they do need to work as hard as they can to abide by the social distancing rules associated with 6 feet between people. You can't get into the business of denying people access to things like food and medicine, and that's the reason why the most important message people should take from this is that good hygiene, good public health, and safety with respect to avoiding the contagion associated with COVID-19 is to stay away from large groups of any kind.
Governor Cuomo has said he doesn't believe in New York and flattening the curve, and that enough in the hospitals overwhelmed. He wants the unemployed engineers mobilized, or whether it be the Army Corps of Engineers to be mobilized.
You sure it's the Army Corps of Engineers? I don't think that's their line of work. What I would say, a little different. What I would say is that at this point in time, we are having daily conversations with our healthcare community about what will be required as we go forward to ensure that we can continue to deliver on the healthcare expectations that people of the Commonwealth are going to have. And we believe at this point in time that we can develop plans that can manage this.
You mentioned earlier about the national stockpile.
Yep. What we asked for, yeah.
So are you expecting more sooner? How depth is the situation? How much went to Berkshire?
I don't know the answer to how much went to Berkshire. I know it was what they were looking for. What I would say with respect to the 10% is I'm less concerned about the 10% and more concerned that it's some sort of a regular distribution. And I said this to the folks in Washington, that I get the idea behind saying, the best way to distribute this is on some sort of a regular basis based on the requests and the guidance that people are getting from states as they go through this process, because that's what states are getting from their providers. The fact they didn't send us our entire request, that's not surprising to me. I mean, if you turn this one around and you think about the way we would deal with this at the state level, the way we would deal with it at the state level if we have requests from cities and towns for stuff is we would put out on an as-needed basis what people are looking for, and we would give them some sense on what the schedule associated with that was going to look like. And the big thing I said to them is, just tell us what the schedule is so that we understand what's coming next. We haven't gotten a schedule on that yet.
Does the state have a schedule in terms of handing out PPE or respirators to certain entities regarding the masks, the hospitals?
That's all being driven out of the command center.
So for law enforcement and frontline healthcare workers, I believe State Administration mentioned working on how to either maintain or expand capacity for childcare. What resources and recommendations are you looking at this time?
First thing we got to do is figure out what people are looking for, and then the second thing to figure out is where they are, and the third thing to figure out is what kind of capacity do we already have and how would it fit.
I asked this earlier, but I guess I didn't hear an answer. I mean, is there any consideration of shelter in place in the nature of this?
No.
Why not?
Because we don't believe that's an appropriate decision to be made at this time, given the facts that are on the ground.
Should the schools still order the gas for the temporary this year? There's going to be a lot of time to get that.
There's a conversation that's going on right now between the folks at DESE and the superintendents and other folks in education about two things. Number one is the schedule associated with the district improvement plans, which are due April 1st, and the second is about what the right thing to do with respect to MCAS would be. And whatever that is, we need to talk to the legislature about it, file it with the legislature, and enact it. That's not something that the state can change without a change in state law.
Thanks, everybody.
These numbers are nothing updated yesterday, but given that we knew yesterday that there was at least community spread in half the counties in the state, do you continue to think it's sufficient that we're only testing people who have been
contact with someone positively ID'd as carrying the virus?
I'm pretty sure the guidance they put out last Friday went pretty far beyond that. Yeah, I'm sure it is actually.
Telling people that they have to either travel to a country, have been in known contact with someone with the virus, and exhibiting symptoms.
That's not what we need. I need to check that one because that's not what we believe. That's not what I believe the guidance was that we put out last Friday. Thanks, everybody.